Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and Free RPG Day is finally here. So today, we're going to review everything you can find in Marvel's contribution to the day, a rules primer, the full X-Force chapter from the upcoming X-Men expansion, and 3 new character profiles from the very same book. Let's get into the details. First, the rules primer. The first 2 pages in this free offering are a rules primer that are described as an introduction designed to give you a head start on the MMORPG rules. At only 2 pages, however, it isn't quite enough to cover the basics. For example, there's nothing in this primer on calculating damage. There's no mention of the ability scores at all, and there isn't even a mention of rank or powers, traits, tags, etc. But there's great news for those of you who are watching this that are new to the game. The rest of the basic rules, enough to actually play the game, are available for free on Roll20. You won't get all of the powers or all of the characters that are in the core rulebook, but you do get a lot, more than enough to play the game and get a sense for how it runs. So check out the link in the description if the little taste of the rules you got in the rules primer has you hungry for more. So before we jump into the X-Force preview, just a reminder, we've already seen the table of contents for the full X-Men expansion book. If you happen to miss the video where I covered this, I included a link in the description, but this might be a good time to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss anything else in the future. Marvel has been giving us so many little sneak peeks and reveals, you can bet that's going to continue as the summer progresses, and I'll be covering and analyzing all of it. So in the table of contents, we see that Alyssa Teague is the author of the X-Force chapter. If you didn't know, Alyssa also wrote Chapter 5 of Cataclysm of Kang. As I'm recording this, she's at the Origins Game Fair right now with Matt Forbeck. And if you look at the credits listed on the visual to the right here, they barely scratch the surface of the contributions she's made to the industry in her 20-year career. For example, she was the lead designer for the Essence 20 RPG, which includes the G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Power Rangers RPG that she wrote for. We're really lucky to have her working on Marvel Multiverse. The X-Force chapter starts with team history, which we knew from the table of contents, but we learn that we not only get a description of each of the major incarnations of X-Force, but also a list of each member on that team. Those teams are the original X-Force, Domino's X-Force, Black Ops X-Force, Uncanny X-Force, Psylocke's Uncanny X-Force, Cable and X-Force, and Krakoan X-Force. One thing worth pointing out is just because a character is listed on the team here, it does not mean we're going to get their profile in this book. For example, the Vanisher and Cluster are not among the 82 profiles we'll be getting in the X-Men expansion, but maybe this is a clue that we'll be getting them in future products. Maybe the Deadpool book. We'll see. Next up, locations. We knew that Cavern X was going to be a location in the book because the map was called out in the table of contents in a previous reveal. But the Camp Verde Apache Reservation and the S.H.I.E.L.D. Helicarrier Pericles are both new reveals. Xavier's and Krakoa we knew about as well from elsewhere in the table of contents. Speaking of the table of contents, eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed something missing. There's a section called Opponents listed in the table of contents that is supposed to be between locations and playing X-Force, and that does not appear in this chapter preview. Now, this could be purely a page count issue, it could be an error, or maybe there was some kind of spoiler in here for elsewhere in the book that they didn't want to reveal just yet. Let me know your best conspiracy theories in the comments. Here's the map of Cavern X. I gotta say, I really dig maps like this. They help me imagine what downtime might be like for a team like X-Force, and it helps me better visualize a roleplay session between missions. I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest of the maps. In the Playing X-Force section, we learn that there are subsections on theme, style, purpose, and transportation. I assume we'll see these for all of the teams. I happen to be in my heyday of collecting comics when X-Force first came out, so they've always been one of my favorite teams. And maybe for me, the theme, style, and purpose sections aren't really giving me a lot that I didn't already know. But those sections aren't written for me. Think of a player new to the game, and maybe the only time they've heard about X-Force is when watching the Deadpool 2 movie. I think these succinct little paragraphs do a really good job of expressing the vibe of X-Force and what makes playing them in a game different than the X-Men or X-Factor. And the transportation section here mentions the Pack Rat, Pack Rat 2, and the Bluebird. Here are a few pictures of them. I'm really hoping this means that we'll get stats for these vehicles later in the book. Fingers crossed. Joining X-Force is an interesting section, and honestly, not something I expected to see. It talks about the recommended requirements like occupations or rank, and the specific way characters can get into the group. For example, X-Force is invite only. It even talks about the character's reasons for joining. Character alteration section here doesn't have a lot, only that you add Team X-Force to your profile, but it's intriguing to think about how this section might be used for other teams like X-Men or Alpha Flight. Powers and roles. Again, this section is a little smaller and maybe would be a little juicier for other teams like the X-Men that try to make sure they have a telepath on every team, for example, or a tank. The role-playing advice here is, again, really good for non-comics readers and can help distinguish the vibe of the X-Force against other teams. In the training up section, the line, similar to the process used with the X-Men, likely refers to the getting schooled rules that we saw in the first Tony's workshop, but it feels like it might be a little bit more fleshed out. Eager to see what those differences might be. The Playing X-Force section wraps up with duties and public perception, which are pretty self-explanatory. The last section of the preview is the X-Force Adventure Hook section. The adventure hooks are split into two, X-Force, which can be used for nearly any era of the team, and then the Krakoan X-Force. Personally, I really like making up my own adventures, so I very much prefer this approach. I'd much rather have 10 ideas that I can take and run with, versus one fully fleshed out sort of half adventure with all of the details spelled out, which may or may not appeal to me and my players. I know that these little hooks aren't for everyone, but I really like to see it here. All right, let's wrap this up with 3 new-ish profiles. Bishop, we already saw a version of him in the X-Men 97 free download. If you'd like a full breakdown of Bishop and all of the X-Men 97s, you can check out my video on that, link in the description. There's only one really significant change here for Bishop. He's got a higher agility and a lower logic. Traits are the same, tags are the same, except this new version has Krakoa, and the X-Men 97 version did not. Lowering his logic and giving him a higher agility makes perfect sense to me. I mean, look at how many powers he has that rely on agility. Logic has limited value for a character like him. Gambit's got 2 significant changes. Both his melee and agility are reduced by 1, and his vigilance and logic are raised by 1. The higher vigilance gives him more focus, and his initiative goes up. And as for logic, well, I suppose this is a good time to remind everyone that there's nothing at all stopping you from looking at both of these builds, the X-Men 97 version and this one, and come up with your own. There's no single build that's more right or wrong or legal to play. Look at how many different opinions there were about the Tony Stark build from my last video. You know, having quote official builds are great if you need something quick for a one-shot or a con game, or if you're a new player that doesn't really understand the nuances of the rules yet. But if you're going to be playing Gambit in a long-term campaign, talk to your narrator, use both of these builds for guidance and inspiration, and come up with a Gambit that's right for you. For me, I would do whatever I could to keep that agility at a 6, if not raise it to a 7. If I needed some extra points to play with to accomplish that, I might lose the tactics power set in its entirety. I just don't see Gambit as that battlefield leader. That would give you 3 ability points to play with, 2 for the reduction of the powers, and 1 for losing the power set, which gives you an extra point via the thematic bonus. That way, I could keep his melee at 3 and raise his agility to 7 and not have to reduce the vigilance or logic to do so. What changes would you make to make your ideal Gambit? And last up, Allison Blair the Dazzler. I love that ego at 7. If any mutant should have an ego that high, the stage performer who has high rank elemental control powers is the one. And with a discipline of 3, she's gonna hit hard. And for those who didn't know, I included a couple pictures here, but Dazzler does have some ability to fly. It kind of comes and goes in the comics depending on who the writer is, and it seems to be more of levitation or floating than maybe full flying. But Flight 1 is a basic power, and levitation isn't, so I do not begrudge Marty Forbeck, that's Matt's son, for giving her Flight 1. Oh, and by the way, we know from the table of contents that Marty did all of the profiles for this book. So personally, I kind of feel that levitation should be in the basic power set since it's just a less powerful version of fly. So I might house rule that for Dazzler and give her levitation instead of Flight 1. Well, that's all we've got for today, true believers. Happy Free RPG Day to all of you. I hope you were able to get your hands on all sorts of goodies. And as always, thank you so much for your support. I hope you all have a great day.